What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to do part 2 of the video I teased a week ago when I was talking about my predictions for the Game Awards award winners, and I said 1 week from today I'd talk about my predictions for what we could see in terms of reveals at the Game Awards. Because whether this should be the case or not, people come to the Game Awards for the announcements, not actually for the awards. People care about Game of the Year and kind of soundtrack of the year, but let's be honest, the main attraction of the TGAs every December are the announcements, and that's what we're talking about today, and I think this could be a pretty good show. Last year's show was the best the Game Awards ever was. You know, say what you want about Jeff, he delivered in terms of announcements last year. I don't know if it's going to get to that level just because we got a new Witcher game, a new Naughty Dog game, a new Elden Ring game all in one presentation. It was a lot of stuff. I don't know if we're quite going to reach those levels, but I think this could be the second best Game Awards show we've ever seen, and that could mean a pretty good show. We know there's going to be new announcements. We know there's going to be some trailers for previously announced games, hopefully with dates attached. And I've got all of that on my list right here of games I think we could see at the Game Awards. So I'm not going to waste too much time in the intro here. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the big three publishers, Sony, Microsoft, and Nintendo, and think about what they could bring to the Game Awards. Then we'll talk about some big third-party companies, and then we'll just talk about all of the random games I had on my mind that I think we could see at the Game Awards. And then at the end, I'll talk about 5 dream announcements that I don't think we're going to see because they just don't seem very likely looking at the 5 I have here. But, you know, I can dream, I can hope. We'll talk about that at the end. My hopes, my dreams for the Game Awards 2025. But let's start with Sony, who I think is the company I'm expecting the most from at the Game Awards. Not in that they'll have multiple announcements, but that the biggest announcement of the night I think will come from PlayStation. And we'll get to that in a second. But first, I want to talk about some smaller things they could reveal at the Game Awards. The first is Astrobot DLC. They did a similar thing with God of War Ragnarok, where that game got nominated for Game of the Year in 2022, and then in 2023 they revealed DLC for it that was out that day. I think they could do a similar thing with Astrobot here. It won Game of the Year last year. You bring a meaty DLC expansion, or maybe even just a free update, to the Game Awards this year as a little, thank you for playing our game, thank you for voting, here's some extra free content for you in Astrobot. I do sort of think this is the last chance for any more Astrobot DLC. I think if we don't get it at the Game Awards, that probably means Asobi has moved on to a new project, which is fine by me, but I do think it's possible that Astrobot DLC could be here, and I'm not going to turn down some freaking Astrobot DLC. I know some people are like, no DLC, make a new game, Asobi. I'm not so much on that side. If they want to make DLC, I will gladly accept it. If not, just make a new game that's excellent as well. The next smaller thing I think we could see from Sony is a reveal for a character in Marvel Tokon, because somehow it has been almost 6 months since the reveal of that game, and yet we haven't gotten a single character announced. It's just those 6 that we saw in that debut trailer, no new ones. We did see a stage at the Sony State of Play Japan thing that they did. Looks pretty cool. It was an X-Men stage. It seems, sick. But give us some new characters, and I think the Game Awards would be a good place to announce them. I think it would get a good crowd pop. I think that crowd especially would appreciate an announcement like that of a Wolverine or a Venom or something. I don't really have anything else to say in regards to Tokon besides the fact that we've got to get these character reveals going, I think. I mean, unless this is a 10-character roster or something, which I don't think will be the case, I can't believe it's been almost 6 months without any character reveals. This is a fighting game. Like, you gotta know the business here. The business is constant hype with character reveals, so I don't know what's going on with that. I think this could be a good spot for it, but if I'm right, I've said this in other videos, and this game is coming out by August, we've really got to get the ball rolling with the character reveals and the marketing, so it's gotta happen eventually. I think it could happen here. The third thing that Sony could bring that I think would be quote-unquote minor would be a new Intergalactic trailer. And honestly, this wouldn't be minor, because I think if Intergalactic shows up here, it means it's coming out in 2026. I think that's the only reason you bring a new intergalactic trailer, is if it's coming out in 2026 and you can at least give that window at the Game Awards. If not, I don't think it's going to show up. And honestly, I think that game's coming out in 2027 at the earliest, so I'm not expecting this, but I think it's possible. Some people do believe it's coming out in 2026, and if that's the case, I definitely think a trailer here makes a lot of sense. All right, in terms of new reveals I think Sony could bring to the Game Awards, I've got two in mind. I'll go with the less likely one first, and then we'll talk about the one I'm sure you're all thinking about after that. The first one is one that I haven't seen a lot of people talking about because I don't think people want to see this, and quite honestly, I don't really want to see it either. But there's a certain 20th anniversary coming up in 2027 for one of Sony's biggest franchises, and that is, of course, Uncharted. Now, people seem to be convinced that the Uncharted series is over after Uncharted 4, which, wrapped it up pretty well, but Sony is not in the era of letting big franchises die, letting them out to rest just because they had a nice ending to them in 2015. No, this is the Sony where every single IP needs an anime or a TV show or a movie attached, and we're trying to build IP, and only big IPs are the ones that can get games right now. It would not make sense based off of everything Sony's told us if Uncharted is dead and they're never going to make another game for it. And I think it would make sense from a business perspective to test the waters with an Uncharted 1 remake for the 20th anniversary. Now, of course, this would get blasted online because they've already remastered Uncharted 1. In fact, Bluepoint did a great job touching up the entire series. But I just think it would be a very Sony thing to have an Uncharted 1 remake ready for the 20th anniversary of Uncharted, maybe even for the launch of the PS6 in holiday of 2027. I don't think it would be announced here. I think it could be, just because Uncharted has won Game of the Year before. It is one of Sony's biggest, most beloved franchises. I don't think this would be a main Naughty Dog project. It would probably be something similar to Last of Us Part 1. I think it would make more sense to reveal it at the PS6 reveal showcase that they do probably in 2027, but I also think there's a chance they reveal it here or maybe even at the Game Awards next year. But it's just something that's been ruminating in my mind, so let me know in the comments if you think that makes sense. I think it is a very Sony thing to do, no matter what we think about it from a, desire perspective. But now let's talk about the Sony announcement that I'm sure you've all been thinking about in relation to the Game Awards, and it's the one that I think you can almost write in pen for this showcase. I don't think we're going to get out of the Game Awards 2025 without a God of War game revealed. Whether it is the 2D God of War Metroidvania game we've been hearing rumors about over the last year, or if it is the next mainline Santa Monica God of War game. There have been some rumors that the next God of War game is going to go in sort of an Egyptian/Aztecian direction, which would certainly be an interesting direction for them to take it. I would like to see what that looks like. And there's also been rumors that this next God of War game is also Cory Barlog's next game, who directed God of War 2018 and then, of course, did not direct God of War Ragnarok in 2022. So, in my opinion, I think Sony is going to bring the next God of War game. It's probably going to be directed by Cory Barlog, and it's probably not coming out till like 2028, but I think they're going to show it off here. It is the, 20th anniversary of God of War this year. All they've revealed so far is a controller. I think that is not going to be the only thing for God of War's anniversary. I think we will see that Metroidvania next year, and I think at the Game Awards this year, we'll see the next mainline game. Hopefully it looks really cool. All right, well, that's what I think Sony could bring to the Game Awards, but let's talk about Microsoft, who, in terms of game reveals, I don't think has a lot interesting that they could bring, but in terms of something else, I think they could make the biggest splash at the Game Awards this year. But let's talk about the games first. Forza 6 is one that comes to mind immediately. We got just a stupid cinematic teaser for it at Tokyo Game Show earlier this year. Let's see some gameplay. Let's see those cars driving around in Japan, cherry blossoms flying everywhere. I'm really interested to see how good this game looks, because it's going to look good. It's going to look pretty. I can't believe they didn't come with gameplay at Tokyo Game Show, but whatever. Perfect time to show it off here. Maybe that is a Developer Direct game, though. Who knows? Speaking of the Developer Direct, I think Fable, Gears of War E-Day, and Halo Campaign Evolved are all games we could see at that Developer Direct in January, but I think we could also see a trailer for one or two of them here. Last year at the Game Awards, Microsoft brought Outer Worlds 2 and revealed that it was indeed coming out in 2025, which people did not really expect whatsoever. I think Fable could occupy that spot this year just because I think people expect Gears and Halo to come out this year. And while Phil Spencer did say in that June Direct that Fable was coming out next year, I don't know how you can really trust anything he says, and there has been some trepidation online about Fable's chances of surviving all of this Microsoft craziness. For the record, I do think it's still going to come out. I think we've seen far too much of it, and it's far too far along for it to get canceled at this point. And I think Microsoft also knows the importance of having a game like Fable on its calendar. But let's be honest, when we're thinking about Xbox at the Game Awards this year, I think there's only one thing that comes to everyone's minds, and that's new hardware. Because Microsoft is not in a good spot in terms of hardware. People don't think there's going to be another Xbox, and I wouldn't blame you if you thought that way. But me, I think we're going to get another Xbox. Will it get revealed here, though, is the question, and I think it could potentially be shown off for the first time at the TGA's 2025. Microsoft did the same thing with the Series X back in 2019. We thought that was a little early. People weren't expecting it, and all of a sudden it popped up. So there is precedent for this from Microsoft, and with all of the concerns about them not doing another console, maybe it does make sense to reveal it a little early and show people that yes, we are committed, at least for the next generation, to hardware. I think it could be an important and valuable statement for them, especially with the Steam machine having just been revealed. I think there's a lot of pressure on Microsoft to deliver with their next system, and so maybe revealing it a bit early does make sense. I'm not sure. I think I could go either way here of whether or not we're going to see the next Xbox at the TGAs. If we know anything about Microsoft, it's that they love to reveal things earlier than they should. So even if this is a 2027 release for this console, it would be pretty Microsoft-esque to reveal it at the Game Awards 2025. All right, let's talk about our third major publisher now, and that is, of course, the big N, Nintendo, who doesn't traditionally show up at the Game Awards with much of anything. In fact, the only time they've shown up at the Game Awards with anything significant has been with third-party reveals, whether it be third-party characters coming to Smash, or Bayonetta 3 in development, or Bayonetta Cereza Lost Demon, whatever that game was. That got revealed at the Game Awards. They don't traditionally bring first-party stuff to the TGAs, although I do think once or twice they brought a Breath of the Wild trailer, but they certainly don't bring new reveals for first-party games to the TGAs. But the interesting thing about Nintendo is this year, they have a... But the interesting thing about Nintendo in this discussion is that this year they do have a third-party collab on their schedule, and that is, of course, the Duskbloods. So while I always found the hopes that we'd see Metroid Prime 4 or Metroid Prime 2 and 3 at the Game Awards last year a bit foolish, I do think it's a real possibility that we could see a Duskbloods trailer at this showcase. Once again, when Nintendo has some sort of third-party collab, they usually do bring it to the Game Awards. That has been the precedent in the Switch era. And even if Nintendo doesn't want to bring this to the Game Awards, I think there's a good chance FromSoft might. They just revealed a game there last year, that being Night Rain. They've won a bunch of awards at the Game Awards. I feel like they always have a presence at the TGAs, so even if Nintendo's like, no, we want to save this for a Direct, I could see FromSoft putting their foot on the table and saying, no, let's show this off at the TGAs, because we know the value of showing off our games on this stage. And if you look at FromSoft's release history, almost every game they've released since the first Dark Souls has come out in the first half of the year. February, March, April, May, those months are prime FromSoft months. Obviously, we just saw Elden Ring Night Rain come out the last day of May last year. They love to target that first half for new releases. Now, they do have Elden Ring Tarnished Edition coming to Switch 2, presumably in the first half of next year, so maybe they're fine with just having that in the first half of next year. But I do think there's a good chance that Duskbloods is a first half of 2026 game, and we just didn't see it in that September Nintendo Direct because they knew they were going to bring it to the Game Awards in December. I also think this is a game that could get its own Direct. in the first half of 2026. So I think you can sort of have an expedited marketing cycle with it if you do have a 15-minute direct explaining the game and showing off why it's so cool. Re-reveal it in December, give it a May release date, have that direct in March or April, and it's a FromSoft game, so it'll probably sell like 10 million copies no matter what. But I really do think the Duskbloods could show up at the Game Awards. I'm not going to write it in pen like I will God of War, but I think there's a pretty darn good chance we see that in December. All right, the next publisher I've got here is not a console manufacturer, but it's Capcom, who, in my opinion, might be the best game publisher going in the industry right now. And for that reason, I don't think there's a lot we can see from Capcom that's all too substantial at the Game Awards 2025. I've heard people say, well, maybe DMC 6 is going to be revealed here. Guys, Capcom has 4 games coming out next year. They don't have any space for DMC 6. Who's going to make DMC 6? They got to get these games out that are coming out next year. Those, of course, being Requiem, Onimusha, Pragmata, and Monster Hunter Stories. To that point, I think we could see a new Requiem trailer. In fact, I would be pretty surprised if we don't. Capcom is sort of running that game into the ground in terms of putting it in everything, giving it trailers everywhere. And there's been some rumors that a certain Resident Evil character will show up in Requiem. And if that's the case, I think we'll see that character in this trailer. If you've been following RE9, you know what I'm talking about. If not, hopefully you get surprised at the Game Awards, because I think it's going to be a pretty cool reveal for those who weren't spoiled on the internet. The next thing I have written down here are Pragmata and Onimusha release dates. These are the last 2 games for Capcom next year that we don't have dates for. We don't even have windows for, just 2026. I think it's more likely that these are both second half of the year games, just because Monster Hunter Stories is coming out 2 weeks before Resident Evil Requiem, which is coming out February 27th. So I know the same people don't make these games, right? It's different studios and stuff, but I'd be pretty shocked if Capcom stacked 3 releases in the span of 2 or 3 months. So I think Onimusha, to me, Onimusha makes sense as like an end of summer game, and then Pragmata makes sense as, you know, sort of your holiday October, November type game. That's how it's sort of working out of my mind palace right now. But regardless, I think we could see a release date for 1 or 2 of those games. Maybe both. Maybe it's like how last year RGG had Virtua Fighter and then Stranger Than Heaven back to back. Maybe Capcom has Pragmata release date and Onimusha release date back to back. I think we'll get at least 1 release date from Capcom at this Game Awards presentation. Probably not both, especially if we are also getting a Requiem trailer, but I think they'll have a presence here, just no new game reveals. Next, I've got Square Enix, and look, there's 3 games I have written down here. You probably can say what they are, but say them with me. Yep, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. Okay, next one. Kingdom Hearts 4, good one. Third, Dragon Quest 12. Yeah, these are the 3 games on my mind that I think could be Game Award reveals for Square Enix. Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 has been getting a lot of smoke recently. Hamaguchi is in like every single interview everywhere saying, it's further along than you'd think, we're ready to reveal it soon, and it's like, okay, so that game is at the Game Awards. Like, you're not saying that for no reason. I think Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 is almost a prediction I'd write in pen. I think we're gonna see the first trailer and the title card for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 at the TGAs, which probably means that Dragon Quest 12 and Kingdom Hearts 4 are once again gonna get the shaft, and they're gonna go to next year with still no new information, which isn't really a surprise because we've been waiting for a while on those 2 games. I will say for Dragon Quest 12, I think we will see a reveal of DQ12 at Dragon Quest Day next year. I think it lines up really well. They've been doing a lot of remasters and remakes. Like, I think it's time to see DQ12, and I think we will see that in May. For Kingdom Hearts 4, though, yeah, I think this is a game we're not going to see until 2027. Maybe the Game Awards 2026, but I think we're not going to see it until 2027. It's really disappointing because we've really only seen a weird cinematic trailer for it, nothing else. But I think we're going to have to wait a lot longer for that game, unfortunately. It just doesn't seem like it is moving along as smoothly as you'd like, and that's okay. You know, take your time with Kingdom Hearts 4. I don't need them to rush it out, but It's disappointing for us because we just want to freaking see it. I think it's going to be a while till we see it. But again, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 is almost a lock for this Game Awards presentation, which is pretty cool. All right, now I've just got a grab bag of random third-party games I think we could see trailers for at the Game Awards. The first one is a new Blue 12 Studio game. Now, I recently played Stray, which is the game from Blue 12 Studio, and I liked it a good bit. I thought it was pretty fun, so I'd love to see what's next from them. They have been nominated for Game of the Year before, so there's some precedent for why they would be at this show. And I think there have been some reports that Stray is getting turned into a movie, and if that's the case, maybe Stray 2 makes a lot of sense for their next game. I'm not really sure why they're doing a movie, though. Like, what possibly could you do for 2 hours with a Stray movie? I don't know. Not gonna watch it, but I will play Stray 2 if they reveal it at the Game Awards. Next one I've got here, Lego Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight. We saw this at Gamescom last year, just had a 2026 window, but that game was playable at Gamescom and it looked like it had a pretty high quality build. I don't think this is a game that's coming out in November. I think this is a first half of 2026 game, and if that's the case, I think it makes a lot of sense to have a trailer and release date at the Game Awards. And by the way, I'm really excited for this game. It looks sick, doesn't it? I mean, if Rocksteady's never going to go back to Arkham, then maybe we just need to rely on Lego to do it, because that game looks terrific. By the way, the people who made the Muppets Racing game on the PS1 make these Lego games. Fun fact, I played that recently, really bad game, but it has some cool characters in it. As a Muppet fan, it's pretty endearing, but God, that game sucks to play. Anyway, you didn't come here for Muppets analysis, you came here for game reveals, and I think the next one that we could see is Marvel 1943. This is the new, I don't even know what the game is because we haven't seen any like real gameplay of it, but I think it's supposed to be like some open world, third person action adventure Marvel game. It just recently got delayed. Apparently it was supposed to come out early 2026. I don't think there was a soul on the planet who expected it to come out early 2026. Like, no one thought that was going to happen. Who knows if it even comes out next year, but regardless, I think we could see a trailer at the Game Awards for it. I am mildly interested in this game. I would like to see more of it. To be honest, I would like to see any of it, because we really haven't seen that much of it. It seems pretty cool. It also feels right at home at the Game Awards, if you know what I mean. So, new trailer, maybe. Next, I think we could get a look at those Sega revivals that we saw at the Game Awards 2023. Obviously, Shinobi has come out since, but there's still a lot of other ones that we're waiting on. Jet Set Radio, Streets of Rage, Golden Axe, Crazy Taxi. All games that I'm really excited to see what they do with in this new era of Sega. And obviously, it makes a ton of sense to show one off at the Game Awards here. Shinobi was shown off at the Game Awards pre-show, I believe, last year, which is crazy, by the way. That should have been like a middle-of-the-show announcement. That game is so awesome. But I think a full reveal of the next Crazy Taxi or Jet Set Radio would be super hype and would get people really excited. So I think if Sega's going to reveal something here, it will be one of those revivals. I guess it's also possible they bring Persona, whether it be Persona 4 Rewind or whatever that game is called, or Persona 6, which personally I don't think we're going to see for a long while. It just doesn't feel like the vibes are there for Persona 6 coming out anytime soon. And also, I don't think we're going to see Persona 4 here just because it didn't seem like it was that far along in that Xbox showcase. Obviously, 6 months is a long time, but I think they're going to wait to show that off again, probably until sometime next year, maybe at the Xbox showcase next year in June. Speaking of Sega, we will likely also see something from RGG here. I think it would make sense to get a Stranger Than Heaven trailer and likely release date here. Given that Kiwami 3 is coming out first half of 2026, you would think that Stranger Than Heaven is probably a second half game next year. But regardless, it would make sense to see it again here and get a release date. It would be the third time it's shown up in a Jeff Keighley show, which would be kind of weird. But this game looks really cool. I'm excited to see what it's all about. So slap a release date on that. The next one I've got here is Injustice 3. Now, there's been a lot of smoke around the fact that we could see the next Injustice game soon. It, again, would be a perfect reveal to have at the Game Awards. Just feels right at home at the Game Awards. I would love to see that. I loved the first Injustice game. Didn't really play the second one, but God, the first one is so good. So I would love to see a new Injustice. I think we could definitely see it here. I wouldn't say it's a lock, wouldn't write it in pen, but it feels like one of the more likelier offshoot third-party announcements that we could see at this presentation, even if it's just a cinematic trailer. We know what Injustice is. We don't really need gameplay, as stupid as that sounds. So I think Injustice 3 could definitely show up here. All right, the final 4 games I've got here would be, I think, the biggest announcements of the show if they were to be revealed. Maybe save for the God of War game getting announced as well. These 4 would be massive deals. First one, a new Remedy game. Now, there's been some rumors that those Max Payne remakes that got announced somehow but not actually shown off a while ago are pretty far along, so I think there's a chance we see Max Payne 1 and 2 at the Game Awards this year. Wouldn't surprise me, but I think we could also see Control 2. We know Control 2's in development because Remedy said so, but it's been a while since Control 1, and we're even going on, 2+ years since Alan Wake 2, so it's about time, I think, for Control 2 to be shown off. That's a game I'm really excited to see officially for the first time. I can't even imagine what it's going to look like, how it's going to tie in to the Remedy cinematic universe. I think Max Payne 1 and 2 are more likely for the Game Awards this year, but I don't think Control 2 is impossible. The next one I've got here is Half-Life 3. Now, there has been a ton of smoke around Half-Life 3 being announced soon. I honestly thought it was going to be announced by this point. It seemed like there was a lot of momentum towards Half-Life 3 being announced really alongside the Steam machine. That never happened. At the time of recording this, we still have yet to see Half-Life 3. I doubt it's going to get revealed next week, which is Thanksgiving week. So really, you only have 2 weeks until the Game Awards to reveal it. And at that point, why not just reveal it at the Game Awards? I know that's not really how Valve rolls. They usually do their own thing, but I think it could make sense to have Half-Life 3 shown off here. People were convinced it was going to be shown off last year at the Game Awards, and it wasn't. So maybe Valve wants to do Jeff a solid and actually reveal Half-Life 3 at the Game Awards this year. Who knows? The next one I've got is probably equally as unlikely, and that is the third trailer for GTA 6. I found it odd how after the delay of GTA 6, they didn't show off anything else. No screenshots, no new trailer. They're probably not saving it for the Game Awards, but maybe Jeff begged them on his hands and knees to have them show off GTA 6 at the TGAs because he knows how big of a deal that would be. Or maybe there won't be a third trailer until next year and Red Dead Redemption... I'm recording on my Mac. I can't do prop comedy. I don't know where the camera is. I just bought this for like $20. Pretty good deal. Look at this, though. Oh my gosh. Do you see that? It's ripped. And then if you look at this, it's dented everywhere. They like shot my copy of Red Dead Redemption with a gun. Maybe that was a reference to the game. Anyway... that was disappointing. I guess you get what you pay for, You get it on sale for $20, you might get a fucked up copy. What are you gonna do? Anyway, that stupid bit of prop comedy was to say that Red Dead is getting a free next-gen update on December 2nd. Maybe that is what Rockstar is using to tide people over until GTA 6. Regardless, I don't think it's impossible that a trailer would show up here, but it's probably not likely. The final game reveal I think we could see at the Game Awards is The Witcher 4. Now, I didn't think The Witcher 4 was anywhere close to being revealed, but then we saw it get nominated for Most Anticipated Game at the Game Awards, and I found that odd because I was like, I didn't think that game was going to come out till 2028 or 2029. Like, I know this is the first year it can technically be nominated, but I just thought it was a little odd to see it in that category, which means maybe it could get a trailer here with a release window of 2027. I don't think it's coming out in 2026. I saw some chatter online about that. I think that's a little bit wish-casty, but I think 2027 is definitely possible, especially after that announcement that it had been nominated for Most Anticipated Game. Alright, those are the games I think we could see announced at the Game Awards, but real quick, let's go through 5 games I would like to see at the presentation. First one is the next game from Us 2. These are the makers of Monument Valley, which you might know, and also Alba, which is this sort of birding, walking sim kind of game. Very cool. Played it for the first time this year. Very cute. Anything Us 2 does is great. They've got that Netflix money because Monument Valley 3 was on Netflix Games. They, in fact, revealed Monument Valley 3 at a Keighley event, so I don't think it's impossible that we could see their next game at the Game Awards, but it's probably too soon. Speaking of probably too soon, a new look at the Haunted Chocolatier by Concerned Ape, the maker of Stardew Valley, would be great. I don't think it's going to happen again. I think that game is like years off, even still, which is a little disappointing, but, you know, we're going to let Concerned Ape cook. I know he's got something good cooking. I also don't think he would ever show up at the Game Awards, but again, these are the hopes, and I would love to see a new look at Haunted Chocolatier. The third game I've got here is the next game from Sabotage. This again is something that's probably too soon. These are the makers of Sea of Stars and The Messenger. But in terms of showing up at this event, I don't think it's impossible. They won Best Indie Game in 2023 for Sea of Stars. So I definitely could see them showing up whenever their next game is ready. I just don't think it's going to be ready, but it came to my mind. I was like, damn, I'd like to see the next Sabotage game. Probably not going to happen, though. Once again, speaking of too soon, I would love to see the next Machine Games title. Of course, these are the developers of the Wolfenstein series and more recently Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. I would love to see Wolfenstein 3 be their next title. It's probably going to be Indy 2, though, if I had to guess. Regardless, I'd love to see the next Machine Games title, but that's probably years off. Again, these are just hopes, and I really hope that the next Machine Games title is sooner than we think. My last hope is one that I actually don't think is that unlikely. The next big Double Fine title. I'm not sure it would be shown off here just because Microsoft has a lot of business to attend to at the Game Awards, especially if they're showing off hardware, so I don't think they're going to have time for a Double Fine trailer. But I do think we're going to get another Double Fine game next year. It seems like the next big Double Fine title, whether it be Psychonauts 3 or something else, is going to come out soon. I don't think Keeper is the big title from them for the next few years. So I think we'll see that at some point next year. But it could show up at the Game Awards, and I would love that. Well, there you have it. Those are all of my predictions for the Game Awards this year. Tell me in the comments, what do you think we'll see at the Game Awards, and what is your dream announcement to show up on December 11th at the Game Awards? Let me know in the comments. It's a freaking party down there. I'll try to respond to as many as I can. Let's get a conversation going in the comments below. Make sure to like the video, subscribe, hit that big, fat button. Gonna be a lot going on with the channel over the next month and change. Gonna have some videos coming out, whether they be end of year lists or special videos I have that I'm working on as well. And if you don't want to miss them, you gotta subscribe. You gotta click the button so you don't miss anything going on with this channel. I'll also be doing some streams for the rest of the year. I want to stream Metroid Prime 4 on launch night. I want to get a Kirby stream in there. I wanted to do a Kirby stream last weekend, but my Elgato capture card was acting funky, so I just said, you know what, we'll push it back, but I am going to do it soon. So again, if you don't want to miss that, make sure to stay tuned to the channel for what's next. If you want to see my predictions for who's going to win at the Game Awards, Game of the Year, Best Soundtrack, all that stuff, it'll be linked in the description. I already did that video giving my predictions, so go check that out if you are interested. Share the video with someone who's excited for the Game Awards this December. And with all that said, I'll see you guys in the next one.